And welcome viewers, friends, foes, and neutrals to the Daily Space Weather. We had a dud of a CME Impact, barely even showing up as anything. It's hardly even classifiable as a glancing blow. We'll talk about what's upcoming and what's not upcoming. And of course, show you the most detailed imagery of the closest star you'll find in the known universe. Thanks for tuning into the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. I'm your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash. That's the past 24 hours from the GOES. The GOES are 304 angstroms wavelength. You may see an interesting crown prominence, a plasma reorientation, and perhaps a CME happening down there at the southern limb. We definitely spotted that on multiple sources. A little bit of plasma reorientation activity there as a crown prominence moves around to the far side of the sun there, and part of it ejects, we suspect. It's a suspected small coronal mass ejection. Let's take a look even closer. There's a great view of that, along with the Earth scale to show you the size of that plasma filament. You could say it's large from the perspective of an Earthling, or you could say it's small from the perspective of stellar outlooks. Let us know in the comments what you think of that. And we're going to take a look at sunspots and so forth and all of the solar features here. First, take a moment to visit our links. So below this video, you'll find links in the description to our Redbubble merch shop. One of the products there has been moving up the list of most popular. It's the Galactic Federation Special Forces, where we invite you to tell your friends and foes and neutrals, Universum Liberate. So there's nothing like speaking a little bit of Latin to make people think that you're in the Illuminati. That's always fun. And if you're sick of what's going on in your local neighborhood, your household, perhaps your town, county, state, tri-state region, maybe your portion of the country, maybe your nation. What about your continent? How about your hemisphere? Are you sick of what's going on your planet? What about in your solar system? What about in your local interstellar environment? Well, many people are, and so they're branching out to bring peace to the galaxy by becoming members of the Galactic Federation Special Forces. So once again, I would say Universum Liberate, and if that's too reckless for you, maybe you're not familiar with the translation of the Latin, we'll have to leave that up to you. Once again, Universum Liberate to each of you out there. Today's featured product on the Amazon affiliate shop is the Anchor Powerhouse 767. You can get it with optional solar panels, by the way. That might run a significant portion of your whole house if you have a full charge on that battery. And of course, that's one of the things that we recommend people have in case there is a power outage. Of course, it's nice to have a battery backup. We've got 3 decent-sized fish tanks. And of course, we don't want our fish's power to be shut down. By the way, we've also got some great imagery of that plasma reorientation event that happened in the southern hemisphere. We streamed it yesterday live. So here is the Twitch channel. And I figured we'd show that. It's a little different view there. That's from the Space Weather Prediction Center's GOES 18 SUVI imagery. Only a small amount of that plasma looks like it has ejected. The rest of it is just kind of on the far side. It might have ejected on the far side, but it looks like it's certainly splashed back down there. You can see the base of it lighting up as it approaches the solar corona. Anyway, moving right along, here's the Sunspot Scenario. That is yesterday plus today, and most of these groups are quite stable over the past 24 hours. No major changes coming to sunspots. Here's a colorized magnetogram for that same period. Yesterday, July 20th, plus today to date, July 21st. And let's move on and take a brief look at what's going on planet Earth, or what's going off on planet... Oh my God, scared the crap out of me. There's a person by the Icelandic volcano cam checking out the Litli Hurter Norder volcanic cinder cone there in southwestern Iceland. So here's a map of the situation going on down there. And it's, there's the new lava field extension shown in pink. And the hazard zone there is the area within the dotted lines. You can find that yourself on volcanodiscovery.com if you like. Where am I? Oh, there I am. Let's see what else is erupting. Of course, that's the LD volcano. And the effusive eruption continues there, creating some new real estate on the Reykjanes Peninsula. It is part of the Fagradalsfjall volcanic complex. And, yeah, it's just an effusive eruption there. Kluchevskoy, now back on the list here on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Kluchevskoy, what's up with Kluchevskoy? Lava descending the southeastern flank, an effusive eruption, and some ongoing Strombolian activity at the summit crater. New batch of magma likely in the conduit. Nishinoshima, now back on the list as well, producing a 10,000-foot ash plume over the volcano islands of Japan. Subanosejima also erupting, producing a 7,000-foot ash plume, 9,000-foot ash plume from Mount Mayan. And don't get caught in a pyroclastic flow. I'll just say that. As block and ash flows continue to emanate from the summit dome, viscous lava material, pyroclastic density currents usually form ash plumes, phoenix clouds, towering wall of cloud rising above the pyroclastic torrent. Again, don't get caught in a pyroclastic flow. Obey the exclusion zones. Karengatang, also exploding, flight level 080. It's an 8,000-foot ash plume over Siau Island of Indonesia. Ibu, also exploding, 7,000-foot ash plume. Tokono exploding, 7,000-foot ash plume. Sangay exploding, 15,000-foot ash plume. It's a flight level 150. Similar size ash plume over Fuego, flight level 150. Some report from Nevado del Ruiz. What's up with that? Just put it on the main page, dudes. And what do we have? Volcanic ash cloud there produced, moving west at 15 knots. And getting right back to our list here. Sabancaya producing continuous emissions, and Ubinas exploding in Peru, flight level 200. It's a 20,000-foot plume of volcanic ash. And again, a quick reminder, folks, please do not pole vault the caldera. It could be unhealthful, and we need the views on YouTube. So, yeah, there's a... And let's talk about earthquakes next. There is the past 90 days on Volcano Discovery's earthquakes list, and guess what? Very low activity in the past 24 hours. Quite low activity indeed. Only one 5 magnitude quake, and it just came in this morning. So there you go. It looks like only a couple earthquakes there in Alaska. As far as U.S. earthquakes, they were small. No quakes of a 5 magnitude or higher for the entire 24-hour period until just before we produced this video. So that the only one there was at Indonesia, Papua New Guinea rather. It was a 5.0. It was at depth of 156 kilometers, so not a very major quake there. Let's get back to space. Here's the past 24 hours from SDO, 171 angstroms. Now, there are quite a few sunspots on the Earth-facing portion of the solar disk. However, the likelihood of large solar flares isn't really that high because of the magnetic complexity. There isn't that much magnetic shear associated with these sunspots, so we've lowered the solar flare watch. I mean, there still is a solar flare watch, but it's not nearly as high as it was just a few days ago. So let's take a look at some more space weather stats here, like the 10.7 centimeter radial flux, which is now at 184 solar flux units. And that radial flux comes from the upper corona, the lower corona and upper chromosphere. So right there, that little sliver there, right where the solar body meets the atmosphere, that's where the chromosphere is located. Above that is the corona. Below that is the photosphere. The 10.7 comes from the lower corona and upper chromosphere. An important transition zone in the closest star. So here's the 1-year graph of the radial flux depicted by the black line. The red line below it is a sunspot number. A little lull in solar activity here, and you can expect that not to continue as the floodgates are open to solar maximum. A lot of people saying a lot of nonsense about grand solar minima. I mean, I can't believe that people are still actually saying grand solar minimum, grand solar minimum, grand solar minimum, grand solar minimum like cults. But we still see news articles coming out about it. It's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous and utter, pathetic, grasping nonsense. Looks nothing like a grand solar minimum. Not one of the features there looks anything like a grand solar minimum. Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard here is not forecasting any ongoing... actually, they are forecasting some geomagnetic unrest. Late night universal time tomorrow. No indication what it's from. Could be from a coronal hole high-speed stream. Let's see what the Enlil spiral has to say on the NOAA website here, the Space Weather Prediction Center. And it looks like another CME impact is what is on the forecast there. So fingers crossed for that. That will be, if that does indeed produce a significant strike on Earth's magnetosphere, then we can expect to see the possibility of mid-latitude aurorae. So fingers crossed for that. Let's hope it's an even stronger hit than the NOAA forecast here. I'm not exactly convinced of it, but hey, you got to take things with a grain of salt and sometimes a truckload, depending on the source. Now let's get back to this nonsense about grand solar minima, because I saw an article just from a couple of days ago here. So this was picked up by Zero Hedge, and from the Epic Times. This was published. Geez, does it not even say when it was published? Pretty pathetic. Doesn't even say when it was published. But I imagine just a couple of days old here. And so this article, I hate this article for two reasons. One, it's going to fuel people's nonsense about geoengineering and chemtrails and stratospheric aerosol injection and solar radiation management and HARP and all this nonsense, because somebody's saying, hey, we could do this to mitigate incoming solar radiation, basically raising the Earth's albedo effect to reflect infrared radiation back into space to make the planet cooler, because of this crazy premise that a cooler planet is somehow better. And I'm not even going to go there because there are so many levels of nonsense associated with this. Anyway, the article, one of the quotes in the article, so not only are they talking about how, hey, Bill Gates wants to tackle climate change by blocking out the sun. Also, David Archibald, a Perth-based climate scientist, talking about the impact of carbon dioxide. Of course, carbon dioxide, the world's most important trace gas at the base of all food chains. And check it out. Here we go. We have just recovered from that period, the medieval warm period, that is. However, according to Mr. Archibald, what is happening now is the start of another solar cycle that may result in a dramatic drop in average global temperatures. In other words, he's saying that this is a grand solar minimum. Dudes, if you are in the grand solar minimum cult, please leave. Please leave. I mean, I have nothing else to say about it. It's completely ridiculous. It's, I mean, look at the features. It's, anyway, we hope you have not joined any cults about climate, about solar activity, or anything like that. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled space weather content here and not spend too much time talking about the ridiculous nonsense that, oh no, the sun's shutting down, the Earth's entering into an ice age because of low solar activity. We don't see low solar activity. We see quite normal activity. In fact, this solar cycle is going to be a little bit above average. Anyway, here are the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. We show the Geospace Magnetosphere movie daily on the channel. And this flies in the face of all the pole shift. Oh, magnetic excursion, we're all going to die because the poles are going to flip. The poles probably aren't going to flip. There's as much information to indicate they won't as they will. So that's the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. Here's the past 4 hours. Here are the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. And once again, if Earth's poles were flipping, you would see quadrupoles and hexapoles and octopoles forming and all kinds of weird stuff showing up on this map. But you don't, because it looks like Earth's poles are just fine. So here's the KP index for the past 3 days. And we only briefly got into geomagnetic storm conditions for about 5 or 6 hours last night. It was pretty weak, a weak sauce impact. And interestingly enough, NASA was actually incorrect on it because NASA had it go in the opposite direction. So the fact that there was any signal at all was really a success for forecasting. And of course, let us know in the comments, folks, if you would prefer to see us over forecast or under forecast. And the reason for that is because we don't want to come out the next day and say, hey, sorry about that, we failed to forecast aurora at mid-latitudes, and you could have seen it last night, but we forgot to tell you about it. So just like blizzard forecasting or flood forecasting or anything like that, you want to over forecast a little bit, because if you don't, people might miss things. So we are well aware of this, and it is entirely by design. Current condition is KP2, geomagnetically calm conditions. So here's the CME impact. This was, again, it was very much of a dud. You can see right here the magnetic field shifted. So that was a sweet thing. The phi angle shifted a little bit. That doesn't really matter. The density came up a little bit. The speed came up a little bit. And the plasma temperature came up a little bit. So classic CME impact features. Unfortunately, the field was not strong. There was not a strong ongoing negative BZ component, meaning this red line did not stay below the zero line here for a significant period of time. And the field just got weaker and weaker. So that was a glancing blow, a tiny particle impact. I mean, the maximum flux there was 14 protons per cubic centimeter. Maximum speed was only about 450 kilometers a second. It got a little above that, 460. So weak sauce CME impact. It could have been a KP8 if it had strong magnetic fields or if it struck more directly, but nothing doing. Current conditions are about 10.5 protons per cubic centimeter for the solar wind density. Solar wind speed here about 376 kilometers per second. What's next, you ask? The GOES magnetometers. We did see some pretty wild variations in those. And of course, those are geosynchronous near equatorial magnetometers on the GOES 16 and GOES 18. And you would expect to see those varied readings there. Despite the weakness of that CME impact, it does cause plasma to sort of reorganize itself. And when that occurs, you see variations in the magnetic field. Let's take a look at the heliospheric current sheet next. One of the most important pieces of data that we show on the channel here at the Smash News Network, Least Busted Name and News. We are big fans of predictive phenomenon. So here comes a sector boundary crossing. It'll be here in just an hour or two. Here you can see that North Pole current sheet showing up. North Pole current sheet depicted there in green, South Pole current sheet depicted in red. So sector boundary crossing, and then maybe a second one only coming in a day or two. This does provide predictive value about especially activity rising and forming in the eastern limb. I won't get into the physics of it. It's a little complicated. It requires immersion in the data. Another important feature of this is we've got some North Pole magnetism hanging out back here at the North Polar region. So another indication that we aren't at solar maximum yet. There's a ways to go, probably 8-9 months to solar maximum. An important point here, folks. Keep in mind that strong solar cycles tend to be shorter solar cycles, and weak solar cycles, like actual grand minima cycles, tend to be longer solar cycles. So we can expect a kind of a short solar cycle, at least compared to solar cycle 24, because it is such a stronger cycle. Also, another quick important point about grand solar minima is that you got to have at least 2 weak solar cycles in a row. We don't have that. So if you're forecasting a grand solar minimum, you're like 20 years out, because you've got to have a weak solar cycle in the next cycle, and then the next cycle after that, another weak solar maximum. So you've got to have 2 consecutive. We don't have 2 consecutive. You're 20 years away from even the possibility of a grand solar minimum. It's just not sussed out by the data, folks. So facts are facts, and they don't care about your cult. Anyway, here's our line of sight field plot depicting the solar B field in blue, North polar field in green, south polar field in red, and of course the gray magnetogram, which brings us to coronal holes. So this is an important feature as we watch the solar polar field reversal process occur. And yeah, we've got some significant magnetic mixing happening here in terms of coronal holes. That's the magnetic field of the sun's atmosphere there. And let's take a look at that in 211 angstroms from the SDO. So there's the past 24 hours. Let's actually bring this back for a minute. There's the latest image. So we've got North Pole coronal holes in the southeast, South Pole coronal holes in the northeast, and then most of the rest of those are South Pole as well. Whoops, there we go. So let's see. These are South Pole. These are South Pole. And these down here are North Pole coronal holes. Sector boundary crossing is something like this at the moment. And you can expect to see that arrive later today. Also, those coronal holes in the southeastern limb there, you can expect those to become more well-defined. And we'll have a great situation here where we have North and South Pole-oriented coronal holes in the Earth-facing portion of the solar disk at the same time. Another feature more common to solar maximum. So, again, a long way to go to solar maximum. That's the past 24 hours in SDO 211 angstroms wavelength. The best wavelength at showing coronal holes. Continuing right along to sunspots. Yeah, sunspots. And here's the current situation for sunspots. No new groups. The flare monitor here is showing a very high likelihood of large flares from this group up here, 3379. So surprisingly high there, really high expectations of an X-class flare. And we've got a filament to name too, so there you go. Some exciting stuff going on. We'll show close-ups of the magnetic shear of that sunspot group before we get to our meteorology segment. So here is the past 24 in, that's 131 plus 1700 angstroms. And let me just bring up something here real quick. We've got to bring up the plain old intensity gram here. Give me just a minute. There we go. Before we show that, let's also show the full disk view. There's 1600 plus 1700 angstroms. And we'll zoom in on the equator to show these awesome wavelengths. So at the moment, the ASAP flare monitor showing about a 60% likelihood of an X-class solar flare up there in the northeastern limb. That's pretty interesting, wouldn't you say? Here's yesterday plus today. That is July 20th and July 21st to date. Again, things have been pretty stable here. And the flare monitor showing a very high likelihood of a large solar flare, especially in the northeast. So that's something. Gauss proton flux continues to subside as we get to energetic particles and solar flares. So that SEP event there subsiding, it was a double whammy. And two significant strikes there. This one here, I think this was actually the most significant solar energetic particle event of solar cycle 25 so far, as the greater than or equal to 50 mega electron volt proton flux actually came up. And there was even a small spike in the greater than 100 mega electron volt proton flux. So again, that is subsiding. You can expect to see the polar radial blackouts. They should be mostly over by now. As far as flaring, the flare profile has dipped since yesterday, so that's interesting too. The sun producing less flares here, so it could be the calm before the storm, especially with that really high likelihood of large solar flares in the northeastern limb. Again, we'll show the close-up high-res magnetogram of that. Before we do anything like that, there's the past 24 hours in SDO 94 angstroms. And moving right along, let's don't get ahead of ourselves. And we'd like to orient our viewers to what's going on in space. So space, a frontier. Here's what's going on overhead Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. That's where we're located, by the way. And if you're into cycling, come visit us in Lehigh Valley, one of the world's top cycling communities. Yeah, one of the world's top cycling communities, right in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. See Trexlertown for details. You can check out the Valley Preferred Cycling Center, thevelodrome.com, thevelodrome.com. Very easy to remember. Located in Trexlertown, PA, known as T-Town, known to cyclists all around the world. As we get people from world championship teams, we even get the world championships, national championships, etc. regularly happen right in Lehigh Valley. Anyway, that's where things are now. Overhead over Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, you've got the Sun, Jupiter. You've got, what is that? Aldebaran. You've got Venus and Mercury also up there in the sky. And if you're viewing the dusk sky, check out Venus and Mars. You'll have a great view of them on opposing sides of the ecliptic. Here's what's going on in the solar system right now. To all our heavenly bodies that are viewing the video, this is the solar system's heavenly bodies. Here is your forecast for the next week. So there's where things will be in a week. People will be frightened that Earth is moving past Saturn for some reason because they think that the planets are in control of solar activity, are in control of your fate, or in control of some things that they have nothing to do with. And let's talk about some facts. Coronal mass ejections. So George Mason University's coronagraphs are back. You can see a CME coming out of the northwestern limb there. That is 104 frames from yesterday, July 20th. Time and date stamps there showing up in the bottom. Like we said yesterday, that's not an earthly directed CME, coronal mass ejection. Here comes some more frames from today. There are an additional 40 frames. And there was a minor CME that came out of the southern limb associated with that plasma reorientation activity. Also does not appear to have any earthly directed components. So here's Soho Lasco C2 and C3. They'll probably corroborate what I just said. That's not too much of a challenge there. We'll also show stereo A. Gotta have stereo A. Feel free to pause the video on this frame if you're not familiar with the close proximity of stereo A and B to Earth, represented by the blue and red circles there. Earth is the green circle. Here's stereo A on the left, and Soho Lasco C3 on the right. Keep in mind those are not synced. The images do show time and date stamps at the bottom. Anyway, it's been calm for CME activity. Don't expect that to continue. Again, with such a high likelihood of X-class solar flares and so forth, it is an exciting time for space weather. So here's the past 24 hours. There's our composite SDO 193 angstroms plus Soho Lasco C2 in red and C3 in blue. Here's a closer view of that. Here's an even closer view. And part of the reason why we show these images every day, folks, is because you have to immerse yourself in the data. I mean, we discovered back in about 2019 that there are some people that are not looking at the right things when it comes to space weather. One of the many reasons why we had a niche to fill. So we had a major niche to fill, and we were like, dude, we need to make these videos because nobody is doing this, and there certainly is a need for it, especially with the current emphasis on space travel and colonizing the moon and things like this. So here's the past 24 hours in SDO 193 angstroms by itself. You can see that filamentary reorientation happening down there. And let's talk filaments. Yeah, filaments, they're kind of important. And there's what's going on with filaments. This is the El Teide, Spain ground-based hydrogen alpha National Solar Observatory telescope. And this filament up here is getting a name. And I don't know what I'm going to name it. I don't even know. Maybe you'll name it. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Naming filaments. That is a major filament, and I'm expecting it to be ejected. Let's hope it's ejected while it's facing directly toward Earth in that that will be the most likely to cause an earthly directed coronal mass ejection, right? So here's our favorite filament wavelength. This is 193 plus 304 angstroms. And let me get out of the way as we zoom in. Again, some huge filaments up there, especially in the northeast. So right in front of that major sunspot, the one that's 60% likely, according to the ASAP flare monitor, to produce an X-class solar flare. Here's the northern hemisphere, and you can see crown prominence is up there around the North Polar region. Looks like it's going to form another solar vortex here. That should be something interesting, an aesthetically interesting thing. And of course, these features are non-existent around solar minimum. I'll just say that. Here's the equatorial zoom. Again, massive filament up here. This one ought to get a name. I've got ideas. I know what I'm going to name it. I've got it. Here's the southern hemisphere, and you'll see a great view of that plasma filament reorientation happening around the South Polar region there. Good stuff. And let's briefly zoom out once again to show the full disk view in those spectacular wavelengths. Ionized helium 304 angstroms and ionized iron 193 angstroms from the SDO. Just splentacular, folks. Splentacular. And you know, we wanted to make sure we weren't just putting out oohs and ahs with these videos. We want to put out important information. And who knew we'd be advancing the science and explaining the solar sunspot cycles? That is absolutely berserk. Here are the past couple of hours from the GOES 18 SUVI. Yeah, I've got a CRAPF theory, C-R-A-P-F theory, about the mechanism that underlies the solar sunspot cycles. And if you want to hear about it, become a gold member of the Smash team. More on that in a minute. And here come bonus features. So satellite charging hazards, we do have some minor ones here over the central Pacific, moving into the central Pacific there. Some surface charging hazards as low energy electrons build up on the outer surfaces of those satellites. Shouldn't be anything major. It's a small area and it's only minor charging hazards. GOES electron flux here cratered shortly after the CME Impact started to arrive there. A common feature. And I guess there'll be a big uptick in the GOES electron flux here in the coming days. That's my guess. Here's the 1-year graph to put that in context. That's the 1-year graph of the greater than 2 mega electron volt electron flux. And there is the forecast model. NOAA expecting an additional dip in the electron flux. So I think this might actually end up here. But we'll have to see what happens. No big deal there. The NOAA forecast model for electrons. And of course, the GOES 16 and the GOES 18, they're measuring those electrons at the F layer of the ionosphere. So feel free to pause the video on this frame if you're not familiar with distances in kilometers, the temperature inversion of the troposphere versus stratosphere, and so on. Here is the vibrational frequency of the F layer of the ionosphere. That's one slice of the atmosphere at about 300 kilometers of altitude. Pardon the screen switching, we'll let that play all the way through. And then we'll show the anomalygram, which is not going to be nearly anomalous. Nearly as anomalous as we expected. So here's the anomalygram, and we're seeing mostly high-frequency anomalies there, at least at the beginning of the run. Surprisingly small amount of red there, as the CME Impact was a lot weaker than expected. So pretty much everybody was wrong on that one. There was a possibility of a G3 level KP7 plus geomagnetic storm. We just didn't see it. And so, hence, not a lot of red there on the anomalygram. Let's bring up the latest image next. And just so you know, folks, it's almost impossible to forecast the magnitude of a coronal mass ejection impact, as we have no idea what the magnetic fields of that plasma are going to be like. So as that plasma blasts through space, it has its own magnetic fields. And if we don't have spacecraft in between the Earth and Sun, we have no idea what those magnetic fields strength or orientation will be. Anyway, here's the latest image. That is 12:45 universal time for the ionogram, and there's 12:45 universal time for the anomalygram. It depicts anomaly in megahertz from a 30-day median. You can view the information yourself at the Australian Government Bureau of Meteorology website. There is what it looks like. Shout out to Kimberly for inadvertently showing me this data. You have contributed to the channel as a result. We also like to show the total electron content because it's depicting the free electrons all the way from the ground level to your GPS satellite, and we do see major GPS errors happening here. Check it out. There is the total electron content forecast, and major GPS errors here in the southern Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean, Antarctica, nighttime GPS errors. Lots of free electrons there out of place. Normally they are concentrated around the equator at noon, and at the moment, not so much. So lots of GPS errors and perhaps unexpected zones there, as Earth's magnetosphere does reel a little bit from that latest incoming space weather infusion, but it's pretty minor. However, the GPS errors might be pretty major, so pay attention to that. Turn on your Wi-Fi location accuracy if you have Wi-Fi hotspots while navigating. That might help. We also like to show the anomaly from the 10-day average over North America to see if any weird signals show up there, as you never know when you'll run into data sets that are important. So we are seeing some high electron content anomalies there over places like the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Pacific Northwest. Also Mexico. So we'll let that play through one more time, as you never know if that is producing a signal that will forecast earthquakes. If that becomes a thing, it'll be very interesting, and it'll be a way to expand the coverage of the channel. Let's show the latest solar intensity gram and the latest colorized magnetogram to close out the space weather portion of this video and move to meteorology. So there is the current situation with a solar station. What do we have down here? Is that a sunspot forming? Look at that! Look at that! That is berserk! Dudes, that sunspot is freaking crazy low, crazy high latitude. Look at how close to the pole that is. Let me bring that up in magnetogram. That is a crazy sunspot, folks. And by the way, if you thought we were on our way down to solar minimum, look at that. That is absolutely berserk. That is a beta gamma class sunspot at an incredibly high latitude. Now, if we've already peaked for the solar cycle, we would see sunspots forming more and more toward the equator and less at these high latitudes. That high latitude sunspot is a major indication that the solar cycle is not yet at solar maximum. At solar maximum, you can expect sunspots at these high latitudes and all the way down toward the equator. At solar minimum, you only see them around the equator. Them is facts. That is an exciting sunspot, no matter how small it is, to be at that high of a latitude. Here's the full disk rockback. And there must be some major magnetic shear associated with this group, so let's take a look at that briefly. Because the ASAP flare monitor, I'm sure, is looking at magnetic shear. So there you have it. It is beta gamma class, but those are not very strong deltas. So again, I find this sunspot down here to be bigger news than anything else at the moment. What happened? I've pressed the wrong button, folks. All right, there we go. Here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news, I try to press the right button. Have I pressed your buttons? If so, leave us a comment, especially a derogatory one. We invite that. Anyway, here's the full disk rockback. And again, all eyes on this sunspot down here. That is an exciting sunspot indeed. Look at how high of a latitude that is. That is berserk. That is berserk. Shout out to Eugene the Philosopher. And make sure you subscribe to his channel, lest thy soul be cast into an ever-deepening and darkening abyss of doom, destruction, and doo-doo doggy diarrhea. If you enjoy the content, press like, subscribe, share, etc. And make sure you visit our homepage, smashomash.com, launched back in February of 2019 in response to pathetic, putrid, disgusting, ridiculous, evil, nonsensical censorship on Facebook. As their stock price plummeted We called it. Smashomash.com, and welcome to the Neo Renaissance. Again, please visit the links. You can find us on Instagram as well if you're interested in lifestyle, fitness, and some more meteorological posts and things like that. Follow us over there on Instagram. Exclusive content available there. And make sure you follow us on Twitter. If you don't, if you've unplugged from social media entirely, we don't blame you. It's pretty disgusting out there. However, if you do have a Twitter account or you want to make one, make sure you follow the hashtag #NameThatFilament. As this filament right here needs a name, as I suspect it could go blasting off into space at any moment. It could be on its way out right now, but it doesn't look like it, according to my other PC. So yeah, name that filament. Let's name it Tim Cook. What do you think? You know, the CEO of Apple? I don't know. Who should we name it after? Tim Cook of Apple? One of the many corporatist CEO douches who upholds censorship? Yes, censorship, a completely un-American concept, violating people's civil rights for the past 3 years in ridiculous ways. Twitter, the censorship is not gone, and Elon has not fixed free speech. Anyway, moving right along to our meteorology segment, we're looking at sea surface temperatures, sea surface temperature anomaly, and ocean currents. Now, if you're worried about cold water being infused into the Gulf Stream and shutting it down, causing a year without a summer in Europe, how about them apples? That water right there where the green circle is 13 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for this time of year. So if that supports your ridiculous grand solar minimum nonsense, I don't know how it would. It sounds like you're full of crap if you are chanting grand solar minimum, grand solar minimum, grand solar minimum. If you are ossified on your beliefs, you're not doing science, you're doing dogma. And the pathetic cherry picking by the grand solar minimum cult is just as pathetic as various other cherry picking when it comes to scientific endeavors. There is the sea surface temperature and currents of the North Atlantic. It's still warming up Iceland and Ireland, folks. There is no year without a summer. And all those forecasts were utter crap. The sun is not shutting down. The Earth is not entering an ice age. If it were, well, where's the evidence of it? Why is the Pacific so warm? Why is the Indian Ocean just in its normal temperature range? Why is it? It's like, what are you talking about? These people are completely berserk. They have painted themselves into a corner with this grand solar minimum garbage, crap, phony nonsense disguised as science, cherry picking in the most pathetic and ridiculous way possible. There's the Arctic Ocean, by the way. Sea surface temperature anomalies, another indication that it's nothing like a grand solar minimum. And it's nothing like, oh noes, we're going to be in an ice age. Quick, make sure your bunker has a whatever. What a joke. Just pathetic. Pathetic and ridiculous. A ridiculous, pathetic scam to sell bunker supplies. Come out of your bunker and look up, folks. Make hay while the sun shines, and it does. Anyway, let's get to our normal meteorology segment. Here are the jet streams of the eastern world, and check it out. We've got a backward jet stream over the western Pacific and the northern Indian Ocean. A huge bend happening here around the equatorial Indian Ocean. Here are the surface winds of the east side of planet Earth. Here are the surface winds of the Americas. Here are the jet streams of the Americas. As we watch that low in the North Atlantic just completely stagnated by Saharan dust as forecast. Also wind shear to its north, a high altitude, upper level anticyclone there with that clockwise rotation. Strong jet stream over the U.S., especially the eastern part, backward jet stream over the southwestern part. Here are the jet streams of the central world. And here are the surface winds. So moving right along here, it's time to show pressure maps. Yeah, pressure maps. There is the mean sea level pressure for planet Earth. Again, this low is getting battered on both sides. It's getting battered from the north by an anticyclone, causing wind shear, which doesn't help the convection. And then you've got from the south side, you've got Saharan dust being sucked into that. Strong anticyclone here over the North Pacific. And a really strong anticyclone here over the southern Atlantic. Two very high pressure zones there. Anyway, continuing on, this is clouds and fog. Yeah, clouds and fog. Depicted by shortwave radiation for the Americas. And we like to use this imagery for our thumbnail. Did you know, folks, that our thumbnails contain more valid and useful information than entire channels on YouTube? Yeah, our thumbnails have more facts than some channels' entire repertoire of content. That's clouds and fog over the North America and South America. And here's our smoke map forecast from firesmoke.ca. And it looks like some smoke is about to make its way into Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. Also some strong fires there around the West Coast, around the Oregon-California border, producing some significant smokage over there. And let's move on to our weather.gov map. Some significant flooding in the forecast there, as well as heat advisories. We'll briefly scroll down to show you the key. If your location is lit, head to weather.gov. Weather.gov. And click on your location. Here come some forecasts. First, we'll show the temperature anomaly in degrees Celsius. That's a 72-hour GFS temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius. I won't try to explain what's being shown because it's visual. That's the reason we put out videos instead of audio podcasts. Here is your total accumulated precipitation forecast in inches, based on the same GFS 72-hour model. Here is our pressure and precipitation forecast for the same model, the GFS 72-hour. So hopefully that helps with your weather forecasting for the lower 48. And it's time to move on to lightning. Here are the past about 10 hours of lightning strikes. We had some significant thunderstorms this morning in Pennsylvania, as you can see there, sweeping across the state, coming down from the Great Lakes. We do have some current lightning as well. Let's take a look at a real-time lightning map from lightningmaps.org. Yeah, lightningmaps.org. It's good times. Powered by blitzachtung.org. Go ahead, say it aloud, folks. blitzachtung.org. The parent website of lightning maps. And we do have some terrestrial strikes here moving across Arkansas into Mississippi and so forth. There are the active cells at the moment. Here's the full planet view. By the way, if you enjoy the content, consider supporting the channel via the Smash Team website. Yeah, smashomash.com/Smash Team. It's the official subscription services site. We replaced Patreon with our own superior service. Now, we do still have Patreon, but if you want additional content, become a member of the Smash Team at smashomash.com/Smash Team. Thanks to our new annual gold paid-up subscribers. There is a gold level, there's a silver level, there's a bronze level, which will cost you $0 per month. So again, for additional content, sign up over there at smashomash.com/Smash Team. We even send out email alerts about things like tsunamis, often before USGS does. We also send out space weather alerts and so forth. smashomash.com/Smash Team. And if you enjoy the content, press like, subscribe, share, etc. if you haven't done so yet. If you're new to the channel, congratulations on realizing it exists. We're frankly surprised that you've realized that it exists due to the pathetic, putrid, disgusting, ridiculous, nonsensical, evil, and civil rights violating censorship of big tech organizations. So thanks again to our subscribers, our new subscribers, our old subscribers, and thanks to our friends and foes and neutrals for tuning into the content. And by the way, welcome to space. So check it out. This low that's formed over the over Oklahoma is really where it's centered. That is a pretty berserk low right there. Some very strong storms there, especially the leading edge of that there. Springfield, you're about to get hit. By the time this video premieres, you'll be getting hit. And let's get the video up by completing this thing and get it onto your screens. So there is the U.S. Doppler radar map of the full 50 states. We'll focus on the lower 48. Here's clouds and fog. And here is water vapor. So heavy rain just struck western Tennessee there. You can see all that water vapor leaving the map rapidly. Here's a recap. Vertical motion in the air column depicted by ground-based Doppler radar systems. Space-based infrared radiation showing clouds and fog even when it's dark. And water vapor showing all of the water vapor from the NASA GOES Interactive Weather Satellite Suite. It's 6.9 micrometer infrared radiation. Thanks for tuning into the Smash News Station. We're delighted to have you. Don't forget to press like, subscribe, visit our links. Hit us up on social media. If you want to send us an instant message, do so on Discord. There's a permanent invite link to the Discord channel on the homepage at smashomash.com. Shout out to Smash staff. These videos were brought to you in part by the Smash team, especially the gold and silver Smash team members. They're also brought to you at massive personal risk and expense by Smash staff and I. So let's shut this thing down. We'll see you soon. I might even peek out of the bunker later today. But for now, may that solar wind be at your back. I'm going back to the bunker again. Whoa!